When I started this channel about 4 years ago, one of the very first Beatle videos I did was their top 10 best songs. And I started to do a sequel to that to go over the next 10 best, and it's been about 4 years. So it's high time that I finish this off. And in that very first video, if you haven't seen it, I'll leave the link at the end of this video. But I very mischievously fit 15 songs into the Beatles top 10. So this would be the next 10 best songs. And one of the things I didn't do on that very first video, I didn't go into too much detail on the criteria I used. And if you watch this channel, criteria is one of my calling cards. So I'm just going to go over the criteria that I use to rate and rank these Beatles songs. And there's 8 of them here, and I'll just go through them real briefly here. So the first one that I use to judge the best Beatles songs is pronounced melody. You know, the catchiness, the hook. You can't get it out of your head, in other words. Number 2, reach. This would be popularity, sales, plays, requests, and just world dominance on the charts. Number 3, song craftsmanship and depth of sound. This would be, you know, vocal harmony, the arrangements, chord progressions, tightness of the music, instrumentation, and general flow. Number 4, experimentation. Are these songs innovative? Are they original? Do they have cultural impact? Are they revolutionary? Do they revolutionize the industry? Do they break conventions? Number 5, lyrical dimension. So this would be a direct communication, lyrics that enhance the melody, that enhance the tone, and enhance the mood. Number 6, does it have wide range appeal? Familiarity. Does it have traditional pop forms mixed with musical styles for broad appeal? Number 7, influence. In its time and beyond. So is it much copied? Did it set the standard? Did it inspire competition? And did it influence both underground and above ground styles? Is it timeless, in other words? And number 8, artistic and spiritual depth. Does it evoke an emotional connection? The first song in this part 2 list is Tomorrow Never Knows. Now this song is notable mostly for its experimentation. One of the first songs to incorporate electronic, psychedelic, quasi-Eastern themes, Eastern philosophy all into a pop song. And the tape loops that were used, and this was really early sampling, this was unheard of at the time. And it was so far out ahead of the curve that it wasn't really received that well at the time. It was received with a raised eyebrow and thought the Beatles had gone off the deep end. At least some people thought that. And it took a lot of years for people to really put it in its perspective, and that's why it's rated so high now. At the time, it was a little too, slightly ahead of its time. It was the signpost, though, for what was to come on the next album, which was Sgt. Pepper. That's when people very quickly were ready for that kind of thing. But in this case, it took a little bit of time. Music historian Simon Philo identifies Tomorrow Never Knows as the track that made, quote, few if any concessions to formula, and so confirmed that the Beatles had unequivocally moved on. Musicologist William Eckhart described it as an example of classical avant-garde, while Colin Larkin said that by introducing LSD and Leary's psychedelic revolution to the Western youth, it is one of the most socially influential records the Beatles ever made. The next song is I Saw Her Standing There, one of the great early tracks, and this is one of those songs that, along with the first album, it just had so much enthusiasm and it gave everybody a buzz. And that count-in was like counting in the whole world. Hey, you guys ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, here we go. And we dive into Beatlemania. So this song is a rock standard for a reason. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pop has come of age, said George Mealy, English jazz and blues singer, about Eleanor Rigby. Now, Eleanor Rigby I always considered to be the son of Yesterday. Whereas in Yesterday, a string quartet was used, they doubled down into a string octet for Eleanor Rigby. And where Yesterday has all this wonderful optimism, though tinged with sadness, the loneliness in Eleanor Rigby doesn't have much optimism. Now, it was recorded, or it was written in the Dorian mode, which is the most common minor mode in Anglo-Celtic folk music. And the strings make it sound somewhat more neoclassical. And surprisingly, the song is written on only 2 chords, so it's deceptively complex sounding while being very simple at the same time.
Ah, look at all the lovely people
Next up is While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and it's built on a descending A pattern that recalls Bach and some classical blues. And I think this song is notable because it came on the scene when, it has this heavy rock sound, but with a tinge of Eastern philosophy, which is just what the counterculture was looking for.
While my guitar gently weeps.
Next up is All You Need Is Love. Now, can any of you hear the French national anthem without thinking of this song? I certainly can't. Now, this song was originally concocted for a worldwide satellite hookup, which is the first time this was ever done, and the Beatles were asked by England to represent them, and they came up with this song. And one of the great things about the Beatles is their timing, and the timing of the song fit The Summer of Love perfectly, and they managed to make it both an anthem and a parody. And writer Jonathan Gould sums it up very well by saying, "No better illustration for the Beatles to be all things to all people than in this powerfully ambiguous song."
All you need is love, love. Love is all you need.
Norwegian Wood is next, and this is one of the first songs the Beatles ever did where the lyrics were probably more important than the music. And the Rubber Soul album was a departure from the boy meets girl themes, and this is a theme where a man meets a woman. Now, the other thing that this song is noted for is the first legitimate use of Eastern instrumentation in a pop song. And John Stevens writes that John Lennon moves quickly from one lyrical image to another, leaving it up to the listener's imagination to complete the picture.
Isn't it good, Norwegian Wood?
If Rubber Soul was the first album to dispense with the boy-girl themes for the Beatles, I would suggest that some of the themes that were more psychological and deep, like Ticket to Ride, were actually hidden in a boy and girl theme. And I think that we see that here in this song. And one of the things that's, I think, notable about this song, John Lennon certainly noted this, in that it was a proto-heavy metal song. And I think we hear the heavy drumming from Ringo, and that drone kind of makes it... Proto is the word. I wouldn't consider this heavy metal, but we can certainly hear how heavy this song is. And this song didn't sell very well. This is one of the few songs in the United States that hit #1 that wasn't a million seller. And I think that it actually maybe put off some people because it might have been a little too heavy. The other thing about this song I want to mention, we mentioned Norwegian Wood earlier, and that song was the first to use Eastern instruments in a pop song. Well, sometimes critics will talk about the Kinks' See My Friends as being the actual first, though an Eastern instrument wasn't used. The drone on See My Friends was created by a 12-string guitar. But if you're going to play that game, I would suggest that the first drone actually was Ticket to Ride, which was 4 months before See My Friends. The next song is All My Lovin', one of the band's early standards. And this song established Paul McCartney as the bona fide co-leader of the Beatles. This song was the lead-off song that they performed on Ed Sullivan. And for the life of me, I don't know why it wasn't released as a single in the States. It would have been an easy #1. Now, writer Ian MacDonald says of this song, "The innocence of early 60s British pop is perfectly distilled in the eloquent simplicity of this number."
And I'll send all my loving to you.
The next song is I Am the Walrus, one of John Lennon's Lewis Carroll-inspired songs set to music. Now, this was the song that really probably turned me into a Beatlemaniac. I was really taken by the literary imagery and just the color of the song, and it was really a continuation of what Sgt. Pepper had started. So those, both Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper, were very big influences on me for that surrealism and the color that the music had in it. Now, one of the things about this song, it's got a lot of sophistication to it. In just the intro, there are 7 chord changes, and there are no minor chords in the entire song. And I think George Martin really earned his salary with this incredibly good string arrangement and daring score.
Sitting in an English garden waiting for the sun.
Just to continue on with the experimentation from Tomorrow Never Knows, this song used live radio broadcasts as they were mixing it. Next we have Nowhere Man. The 3-part a cappella intro with that harmony will grab you like no other song will. And this is another song that dispenses with the conventional themes. This song sums up pop music in the mid-60s. And it's told from the perspective of somebody with no worldview, but that typically, I don't really pay too much attention to that because I'm too taken by the three-part harmony and the killer guitar solo. So those 10 songs make it an even 25 songs if you include my first video. So those are what I consider, based on my criteria, to be the Beatles' 25 best songs. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up here were two songs that I took off this list. And I started to think about the two songs because they were Love Me Do and The End. And I had them next to each other. Love Me Do on top and then The End right underneath it. I didn't realize that I had essentially their first song and their last song side by side. And I ended up removing them. But I thought they would deserve some special attention here because Love Me Do is a song that if you listen to it now, very few people will consider it to be one of the Beatles' best songs. But the fact of the matter is that if, and I say this as somebody that came a generation after the Beatles, so I wasn't around to hear what Love Me Do sounded like coming on the scene, because everything before it sounded completely different. And Love Me Do was raw, it was rudimentary, it wasn't spectacular, but here you had four guys playing their own instruments, you know, chugging away, and it just took hold. And along with Beatlemania and a lot of other things the Beatles were doing, like a lot of live performances, this thing took off very slowly, but it took off in a way that about every third person in England actually owned a copy of it, if you count the numbers, because it didn't chart high. And because it didn't chart at #1 in the UK, people assume that, well, it was a moderate hit. This is not so. It sold incredibly well over like a 4 or 5 month span and just sold steadily. So that shows the staying power of that song in its time. And I think it's important to take the perspective of understanding what pop music sounded like before this song and after this song. That really, therein lies the importance of Love Me Do. Now, the other song is The End. Now, it's almost like the Beatles planned this to be their last song. Now, it wasn't their actual last song they recorded, but pretty darn close. And one of the things I always found interesting is that this song just screams teamwork. And they worked so well as a team, in spite of having some very difficult interband personality issues. They were breaking up at this time. And for those people who think that Let It Be was the breakup album, that is not so. It was Abbey Road. All the hard meetings were had during this album. And somehow they were able to put that aside and come in and work on this song together. And I think it's special because you have the guitar solos traded off by Paul, George, and John in that order, and the drum solo by Ringo, which he lifted from In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida against his will. He didn't like doing solos. But it was one of those songs that I would call it the perfect way to close the 60s in 2 minutes and 5 seconds.
Love me do.
So there you have my top 27 Beatles songs. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to have other Beatles material coming, some of my favorite songs, and we're going to break down some individual songs in the coming months on my Spotlight On series. So if you like Beatle music and discussion about it, you'll find it here on Pop Goes the 60s.